everyone. If you could please take your seats. Now we're going to start a wonderful discussion with Julia Randell-Khan, Ambassador from Stanford Center for Longevity, and Michal, Oshman, author, CEO, and founder, Maximize Consultancy on Finding Purpose.
Okay. So, hi everyone. So I'm Julia Randell-Khan, and together with Michal Oshman, we're going to have a bit of an exploration on the subject of purpose. So we're going from plastics to purpose, and quite a shift there, or maybe not. So in terms of my role at the Center on Longevity, I'm an ambassador for the Stanford Center on Longevity, and I really took that role as an opportunity to be able to step back from my legal career and think about what next. And it took me to the Stanford Center on Longevity and a research on their new Map of Life program, which is very much an interdisciplinary program, thinking about all the changes that are needed when we think about longer life, from education, finance, work, retirement, the environment. And obviously, cultural change is something that's also key to that. And so purpose very much sits within that. And Michal, do you want to introduce yourself?
I think I arrived to the topic of purpose through my life experiences. I think many people that deal with purpose and therapy and meaning, it's not always the case that they had the best childhood or felt a lot of purpose or safety in their childhood. So personally, I grew up raised by my parents, but also by my grandparents. And all of my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. Specifically, my grandmother Hannah, who jumped off the train that she later discovered was on the way to Auschwitz. She was shot at the back by the Nazi. Her mother, her father, her brother, and her sister were murdered. And I was the first granddaughter after the Holocaust. And my grandmother's, I guess, life mission was to prepare me for the next terrible thing that can happen. And most of my life, I've been miserable and really wasn't sure why I'm even living in this world, and even had difficult thoughts. But it was only later in life that I discovered that there's this thing called meaning and purpose, and that I'm not the sum of my memories or my fears, and there's potential for every soul. I also discovered that I have a soul. I took those learnings and I embedded them in a place that doesn't have much soul, which is tech and social media companies. And I've been working in the last 15 years at Facebook and TikTok, most recently as the global head of company culture at TikTok. And only recently I gifted myself this thing to work for myself that also has its own anxieties. So I think for our session today, we want to invite you to use your different sides of you, who you are as a person, as a woman, how you were brought up, what makes you you, but also what we do professionally and how to connect those things to purpose.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think we're bringing some different perspectives to this topic. First of all, the topic of finding purpose. I don't actually think you can find purpose. It's not a thing, it's not a possession. It's more a sense of being, perhaps being purposeful, nudging you in a slightly different direction, taking some steps for change. So that it's sort of inner compass. So I think what we would like to be able to do today is also have an opportunity for some chat, to learn from each other about our own perspectives on purpose, because it very much is a personal exploration. So we're going to divide the session into a little bit about the science of purpose, and I'm going to run through a few studies which really demonstrate the value and the health benefits of having a sense of purpose in life. We're at a longevity summit, so I think that's important. Then we're going to have a bit of a conversation in terms of unpicking purpose in life and why we think it's important and the impact, but particularly thinking about some frameworks, some resources that we found useful in terms of that thinking. And then we're going to have sort of an open session asking you what you think, why are you purposeful, what is meaningful, what matters to you most, before we go into the final discussion. So that's the plan. So in terms of purpose for me, this is a picture of Laura Carstensen. She's the director of the Center on Longevity at Stanford. And I think she gets it right when she talks about if people are thinking about living healthier for longer, we need to think about why. Going to some of your points, Michal. What's that for? It's not simply for the number. It's so we can do something with our lives. And I just have to tell you a little story. At the lunch break, I went to Pret to get a soup. And I was sitting next to a lady called Laura. She was about early 70s. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, actually, I'm just about to have a talk about purpose at a longevity event. And she said, oh, my purpose, she offered this. She said, my purpose is to get up every day and live it. And it's a simple thing, but this is a lady sitting having her hot chocolate and wanted to reach out and talk. And she said she has a great sense of optimism. And so that sense of that mindset, that purposeful, it's an open mindset to talk to anyone, I think is a great sort of little example of purpose with the small p in terms of everyday living. We talked about everyday living. So let's get onto the data. If we look at the data, the huge amount of evidence now in terms of the value of purpose as an indicator of healthy aging. I mean, that's obviously just a snapshot of some of the reports that are coming out from different, particularly medical units, public health centres. I wanted to draw out really sort of three main points. First, around mortality and living longer. Secondly, this point about the epigenetic aging and how strong social relationships, which often are grounded in the context of purpose. And then mindset. So let me go to some of those. The Living Longer study, which I wanted to particularly refer to, was out of Boston University School of Public Health. Huge study, 15,000 people over a period of 8 years. And the big point is that people with a purpose in life, and they were using a consistent sort of set of questions to anchor what they meant by purpose, gives you a lower mortality risk by 15%, especially for women. And this is across all races, all socioeconomic groups, so really powerful data about the impact of having this purpose in life. The second point about this survey was about the influences on biological, physical, and psychological and social health, which is really worth looking at. So again, resilience to stress, encouragement to do more physical activity, lots of different benefits from having that sense of purpose and what that gives you in terms of health benefits and opportunity to live longer. The second study, which is actually published just last month in Science Direct, came out of Harvard and Cornell, in relation to looking at the aspect of strong social relationships. And often, when people are thinking about their sense of purpose, having social connections is often key to that. It's sort of anchored in things like volunteering, mentoring, things where you are connecting with others. And the positive impact of that is it slows biological aging. And this is they're using the epigenetic clocks, looking at the things at a molecular level. For the medics in the room, I'm sure you'll understand that much more clearly than I do. But it demonstrates, by thinking about purpose in this more holistic context of the connections that you have. You think about your social connections. We're here today. I mean, this feels actually very purposeful, having this conversation, and the new people that you'll be meeting, the new learning that you're getting as a result of this session. So thinking about social connections and the impact of social relationships is being demonstrated as being key to helping our biological aging. And then thirdly, the point about mindset. This is research done by Becca Levy out of Yale. She's a gerontologist and a psychologist. And she got interested in looking at the attitudes to aging in comparing the US and Japan. And found through her research that people who have a positive mindset to aging, like the lady Laura I met in Pret, positive attitude to aging, have probably 7.5 to 8 years longer life. So this is just a tiny snapshot of the many, many studies that are now being done on the benefit of having a sense of purpose in life. And I think it will only grow, and a lot of the other studies obviously show other positive aspects in terms of reduction in chronic disease, impact on cardiovascular health, that kind of thing. So a huge other sets of benefits too, which I think are really worthwhile being aware of in the context of this wider discussion that we're having today in the context of longevity. Two other things on the science side. Blue zones. Certainly this morning, if anyone hears this morning, blue zones got quite a big mention. I'm sure everyone knows what the blue zones are. These sort of longevity hotspots around the world in Japan, Costa Rica, Greece, Sardinia. One of the common threads that comes through the research on the blue zones is this sense of purpose that these communities have. And so, again, it's being demonstrated where these communities have very long-lived people, and often very healthy long-lived people. This sense of purpose and this sort of cultural practice of a sense of purpose is key to longer life. And then the final point on the science that I wanted to mention was the work being done by the Purpose, Science and Innovation Exchange. This is also out of Cornell. Now, this is research being done on young people, people in the ages of 14 to 25. A lot of the data that we've got so far is in relation to adults, or certainly older adults. So this, I think, is really important research the centre is doing in relation to looking at the impact of providing an opportunity for people, the younger people, to work in the community, to demonstrate the value of the improvements on their well-being, their sense of worth, their self-esteem, in relation to how they sort of live their life. And they've got something called the Contribution Project, which is really interesting, which is basically young people are given $400 to spend however they want on a topic that matters to them. And then the researchers are then analysing the impact of being able to give to this particular project. So it could be doing something around bird life, for example, is one of them, and demonstrating greater awareness of bird life on campus. So little projects that they have personal interest in, that they're personally motivated by, is having an impact on their overall well-being and sense of purpose and their overall health. And they, at the centre, are actually starting off on a national purpose survey focused on young people. So I think in today's climate, investing in the youth and supporting youth in terms of this kind of topic is so important. So that's some of the data, which I hope you found useful. So going on to a conversation. And I'm going to ask Michal a few questions in terms of her work on her book and her work with companies in relation to sort of really getting a sense of what she is seeing from your work in relation to working with people on this topic. So in terms of what you're seeing, Michal, and Michal wrote a book probably about 2 or 3 years ago. Here it is. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Okay, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And so I just want to ask you, what motivated you to do this book? I know one of the findings is that from fear, working then onto finding purpose and achievement. What were your main findings and drivers for doing that book?
So I chose the title, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid, and focused on writing about fear and overcoming fear, because fear was the main feeling and experience that I've known most of my life. And every day felt like it could be the last day. So that mindset, which I don't recommend everyone living with, but that's just the way I'm wired. But the more I spend time learning, studying, educating myself, but also consulting and working with these companies, I realize that people are afraid. And by the way, it seems like recently people are even more afraid. Leadership teams, senior leaders, everyone is afraid of something. In the context of work, it seems like people are afraid of becoming irrelevant, of realizing that they may need to reinvent themselves again and again. I feel it myself. I thought I'm going to reach 50 and have all these achievements and I'll carry on. But no, I have to get myself again out of my comfort zone and try and learn new things. And people are also afraid about being exposed, of not knowing everything. We also live in an era of too muchness, which I write about in the book. Too many expectations, internally and externally. I have to be the best mom and have to this lifting, this power, this physical, whatever. I don't do it obviously because I don't even know how to say it in English. But I have to stay fit. English is not my mother tongue, sorry. And I have to be a good mom, and I have to be a good daughter and a wife, and obviously a senior leader, and be smartest and have like 5 million university degrees. Why? Because I feel like I have to, and it's this internal talk. So this too muchness with this sense of the world moving so fast, not only in corporate, but specifically from my perspective, people are afraid. And when you're afraid, you can't be creative and you can't build meaningful relationships. And we said that this social relationship is one of the key indicators for like a better and longer life. So I challenge people to ask themselves, what would you do if you weren't afraid? For some people, it's just to date someone. For other people, it's actually to separate from the spouse that is not good for them. But it's just giving people permission to think beyond their fear. And that's kind of an area that I'm very passionate about. And I want to say something on the personal level about the word purpose. Many times I use the word purpose and meaning. I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. That really dropped the penny that many of us, and I would say maybe in the past, I thought I was, maybe a bit low or down for different reasons for not having certain things. I think one of the reasons that I felt that way is because I didn't know why I was in this world. And only kind of later, becoming more closer to my heritage, I realized one of my favorite sayings and kind of spiritually is that the day you were born was the day that the world couldn't exist any longer without you. The day you were born was the day that the world needed exactly you. I try to say it to my children on birthdays, but not only on birthdays. I think we often live in the sense that we're just here, and I just happen to be born to that family, but you're here because you're needed. And I think when people say purpose, they think it's like this big word that belongs to executives or heads of state. It's that lady that you met at Pret. She's here because she wants to wake up in the morning and to be alive. And I'm sure she does other things as well. So actually what I try to do in companies is take leaders down from looking for that capital P purpose or capital L leadership, take them down to the day-to-day. What matters to you to bring to the world that's not just about you. Because the other thing that we're suffering from is self-obsession. And that really doesn't help us with healthy living.
No, thank you. One of the topics we covered this morning at the Longevity Forum this morning was around reimagining careers in the context of our 40, 50, 60, 70-year careers. And in your experience of working with companies, what are you seeing in terms of companies helping people with the conditions for longer working life, particularly when we think that a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of autonomy is something that people are looking for in their roles at work. And I wondered to what extent you've looked at that and had experience of that in the work you've been doing.
I know it's filmed and I'm signed on all sorts of NDAs, so I'm thinking twice before I answer candidly. I worked for companies that spent a lot of time and effort and resources on making employees' life amazing. 5 types of granola, 15 types of banana from all over the world, telling them that that's going to make them their lives better. And at the same time, without realizing, taking something else from them. So I'm always very hesitant about what companies give and what you have to kind of give back, even if you don't realize it's happening. And then companies, initially there was a very good effort to put emphasis on belonging through diversity and inclusion, but that unfortunately also kind of lost its way a bit. If I'm honest, I think we need to encourage, I know there's coaches here in the world and in the hall and therapists. I wouldn't count on my company to be able to do it for me. I would hope that people will start to develop this understanding that they're in charge of their well-being and they're in charge to know what matters more or less, and that they put those boundaries. I do expect leaders and companies to be able to give the absolute kind of basic for people to be able to make those choices. And it's scary. And I know that many people, and maybe some people here as well, they kind of know that maybe their company have a great brand and they have an email ends with tiktok.com, and when they send an email, everyone replies to them. I had to make personally the hard decision 2 years ago to leave TikTok, to go on my new journey. And someone very close to me said, but who will you be? And I was like, wait, I'm a mom, and I'm this and that, but the way that we identify so much, and I'm sure that you advise and consult to people that actually that glue between who you are really to your role is not helpful. I actually think to separate that glue and just know who you are and what you're here to do in the world is a much healthier approach.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that actually leads on to a word about some frameworks and resources that we found useful. I mean, I'm sure many people are familiar with the Japanese concept of ikigai, and we've just got the sort of summary on screen there, if you can see it. But looking at ways to think about yourself in the context of purpose. So the 4 aspects. I'm sure if you've seen this framework. 4 aspects to it. First of all, what do I love? What are your passions? What What brings you joy? What am I good at? You know what your skills are, you know what your talents are. What can I be paid for? That point about work, and what the community and the world requires from you, and then what does the world need? How can you earn that living in the context of what the world needs? So there's some questions there that are interrelated that you can think about when you're wanting to think about a purposeful life. If you're thinking about making some shifts or some adjustments or some little nudges into the ways you're thinking about your life in the context of your personal life or your working life, a framework for thinking about that. That's something that might be useful. And then secondly, I co-founded the Purpose Exchange when I was doing my work at Stanford, which was really a way to help people think differently about their future with a greater sense of purpose. And we, again, like the Ikigai model, focus on identity, really understanding who you are, intention, where do you want to go, and then the action of how you're going to get there. So lots of different models, frameworks for thinking about this topic. But we'd really like to ask you a question. What we'd like you to do is to turn to your neighbour and just ask yourself, or say to your neighbour, what is it that makes you feel purposeful? Just let's have 3 minutes, talk to each other, and then we'll come back. For 3 minutes.
I love that noise.
Well, I think. Hi. Sorry to bring the energy to a close, but it sounded from the buzz in the room that it's actually generating quite an interesting conversation for everyone. So. So what we would love to do now is open up for some discussion. I mean, certainly when I think about purpose and being purposeful, it's about this sense of generativity and sort of give it purpose beyond the self and giving to the next generation. I have an experience of, I found a walled garden in a park near our house, and I've started to do some volunteering there. I found it a very peaceful place where I was able to go and actually reflect when my niece was very ill and was dying. And I wanted a way to give back to that community. And it's been a revelation, and I now go along with my 2-year-old grandson. And it really does feel that sense of ongoing giving back to the community. And certainly for me, if you look at the work of Martin Seligman, one of the gurus on positive psychology, so the essence of that purpose meaning is about that generativity, giving back to the greater good. So that may have come up for people today, I don't know. But what would
I
you
think
say,
about
Michal?
Claire when I think about purpose. I don't mind embarrassing you. I have a flight in 3 hours, so you won't be able to get. Because I was thinking, like, how did I arrive to this session? I'm not in the business of longevity. I'm very keen on this topic. But Claire, being like just my doctor, but so much beyond that, is every time I come to you, you find time to ask me about myself. You show interest. And I was just thinking, you said that people don't find, the purpose is not going to just land on your lap, it's here it is. You make it, you birth it, you create it. And I think the most powerful way to create purpose is actually to be interested in other people. So I realized I'm here because I care about Claire. I'm loving meeting all of you. And no, seriously, I changed to the night flight and it's fine, just because I wanted to be here. So I think these dots do connect. Sometimes your purpose is actually someone else's purpose that you find engaging and relevant, and you just want to be there because it's their purpose. And I think you have to be able to flex that sometimes in marriage and with your children. Sometimes it's about one of my children and he's everything at the moment. And this art of dialing up and down. So I think one of the practical tools that we spoke about is, without being extreme, allowing yourself to dial up and down. Sometimes the dialing up means that the only thing purposeful is to walk every day for 55 minutes. To be able to blend that. That's the most important thing I just told you. Now I'm obsessed with yoga. It's a new thing. No one can touch it. But then another day, and let's hope it lasts. But then in 2 weeks, something, but that's okay. But I choose and I decide. And the last thing to say is that one of the things that gets in the way of people creating that purpose is that they look at what purposeful looks like for someone else. That illness of comparison. Oh, it looks great on her, I'll try it too. It's much better to start from within yourself to try to find what's meaningful to you. And you don't have to post about it on Instagram. You can just contain that purpose within yourself.
Great. So we've got about 5 minutes left. So we'd really love to hear from you, because one of the aspects of it is about learning from each other, sharing insights, experience, perspectives. So would anyone, yes?
It's just something you mentioned earlier about taking care of yourself and about your job. And I learned, You mentioned earlier about your friend and when you left TikTok and who you're going to be, and it's someone I wish I could remember who it was, but many years ago. And it was a former leader, I think, who said to me, "Your job is what you do; it's not who you are." And I think that's something really important to think about when you're looking at your purpose. So I always keep that in the back of my mind when I have a bad day or it's like stressful. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I wish I knew, because that person said to me, "But you're going to be ex-TikTok." And it was someone very close to me, very senior. So this definition of we ex people because they're not, that's an illness. Yeah.
But thank you very much. Anyone else like to offer a perspective, insight? There's certainly lots of buzzing conversations in the room, so I'm sure you've got lots to, yes.
Hi, I thought that was amazing. I really resonated when you talked about fear. And fear governs us so much. And I have stepped away from burnt out exec in fashion to purposeful founder. So every day I have to face fear. And it's normally working capital, cash flow. But actually what I wanted to say is in January, I literally felt I had to step through fear. I had to make a decision. Do I keep going with this business or do I stop? And it's like doing a land speed record and the car was going to burn and break up and I was going to die. But I had to stay and I had to keep going, and I decided to keep going, go to a place which I didn't want to. So I stepped through fear and I came out the other side, and then suddenly I don't feel fear. And it's just the most amazing thing. And so the lesson there is step through your boundaries. You don't know how far you can go unless you just keep going. But what's on the other side is so blissful, it's worth it.
That's a great story. And I think one aspect is also you don't need to do it alone. You can do it as part of community, having sort of a purpose, confidant, buddy, partner. It doesn't need to have something that's isolated. Certainly when we were doing the purpose exchange sessions, meeting in community was really important to share insights. So, yes.
Actually, I'm an entrepreneur, and thank you. Thanks. Thank you. I'm really touched by what you just said, actually. I'm an entrepreneur and I've exited 2 businesses, and I've always felt that like my badge of honour has been like, I power through everything, nothing touches me. But more recently, being more open to collaborate with other women. And, the point that you just made has really touched me, and actually being able to lean on people. It's not something I've found easy. But it's helped me massively. And I would say if you're feeling lonely as an entrepreneur, definitely, don't be afraid to say that, because it's like being in a black hole, and it's amazing how powerful when you open yourself up with other women and men will be when you show that vulnerability. And it was just something that I never did. And it's just been incredible for me. And that has definitely given this phase of my career now purpose, without doubt.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay. Anyone else? Any other points? No. So I think, I hope you've found this useful in terms of touching on different areas of exploring purpose. As I said at the beginning, I don't think you can find it. It's not a thing or a possession, but it really is about sort of rethinking small changes, being alert, aware of how you're feeling and reacting to things, because things will change. Your purpose will change. So thank you for engaging so enthusiastically. And,
Thank you.
fabulous session.
Thank you. I just realized that Claire also helps birth purpose, not just babies. And I'd like to gift a book for each of the three ladies that asked the question, if you have a minute after. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.